The night is alive. Something moves just beyond sight. Footsteps echo where no one walks. Doors rattle in empty barracks. Shouts pierce the darkness, then vanish into silence. Nothing answers, nothing responds. A truck rolls down a deserted road. Its headlights illuminate nothing. Empty fields, empty streets, yet something is there. A metallic hiss fills the air. Soldiers freeze mid-step. Eyes widen, hearts pound. Orders are forgotten. Radios crackle with static. The messages are gone before they arrive. Shadows twist unnaturally across walls. Figures appear, then dissolve. Whispers linger, echoing unintelligible. Fear spreads faster than sound. Panic rises in the mess hall. Plates sit untouched. Forks hover in midair. No one knows why. Soldiers glance at each other, hoping for reassurance. There is none. A sudden tremor shakes the ground. Not from explosions, from something deeper, something older, something patient. Somewhere a command is given. No one obeys, reports vanish. Logs contradict themselves. Maps change overnight. Confusion is total. The officers confer in whispers, but words fail them. Something happened, something unexplainable. And yet nothing has been fired. No bullets, no artillery, not a single battle has been fought. The army waits uncertain. The world waits unaware. The question hangs in the night, heavier than fear itself. How can a war be won without ever fighting? In 1944, the war had reached a crescendo. Nations were exhausted. Europe was a chessboard of strategic points, each city, river, and hill vital for supply lines, troop movements, and intelligence networks. Every inch mattered. Every mistake was deadly. The northern region in question was no ordinary location. It sat between vital supply routes and a heavily fortified enemy stronghold. Commanders knew controlling it could determine the fate of the entire campaign. Yet, despite constant reconnaissance, something about the area remained unpredictable. Soldiers endured long marches through mud and snow, constantly drilled to anticipate the enemy's next move. Nighttime brought little comfort. Rumors circulated about strange occurrences, guards who vanished, distant lights that flickered with no source, and radio signals that were never clear. Even the most seasoned troops felt an unease that could not be shaken. Strategic maps covered tables in command centers. Pins marked troop positions, supply caches, and patrol routes. Each plan had contingencies, but fear remained. Troops knew that uncertainty could strike faster than any enemy advance. Civilian reports were ignored, or at least dismissed, as superstition. Yet the atmosphere of tension, suspicion, and quiet dread pervaded every camp, mess hall, and bunker. Leaders whispered of the unknown factor, though no one could describe it. Amid these conditions, armies prepared meticulously. Weapons were stockpiled. Units drilled relentlessly. Patrols ran in overlapping schedules, and communications were checked repeatedly. Despite all this, an invisible anxiety lingered. Soldiers couldn't explain it, but they could feel it in their bones. The coming events would be unlike any previous experience. History would later remember this moment as pivotal. But at the time, commanders, soldiers, and civilians alike could only wait, knowing that the world was about to witness something extraordinary and deeply unsettling. Corporal Emil Cross had joined the army at 17. Small, wiry, and meticulous, he moved through drills with a precision that bordered on obsession. Every morning began before dawn, boots polished, rifles inspected, formations executed with near-perfect timing. Mistakes were punished, failure frowned upon, and discipline was survival. Cross's unit was one of the most disciplined in the region. Officers expected obedience without question. Orders were anticipated before given, and soldiers learned to read the slightest gestures. Yet, amid this rigid structure, Emil felt unease. He noticed irregularities others ignored. Reports that didn't match patrols, odd sounds in the barracks, strange silences that lasted too long. Every soldier followed strict daily routines. Mess halls were orderly, equipment maintained without flaw, and drills repeated until they became instinct. Lieutenant Becker, their commanding officer, kept meticulous logs. A single discrepancy could result in severe punishment. But Emil's concern went beyond punishment. He sensed the impossible was approaching. Despite discipline, the men were human. Fatigue, fear, and longing crept in quietly. Letters from home reminded them of what they were protecting, and whispers of strange occurrences unsettled them further. Soldiers bonded quietly, sharing anecdotes and rumors in hushed tones. Yet when anyone pressed on the anomalies, the topic was quickly abandoned. Discipline demanded silence. Cross's nights were sleepless. He walked guard posts, listening to the wind, the forest, and the occasional creak of a distant building. Something always felt off, unaccountably off. Other men shrugged it off as imagination. Emil did not. He felt a presence, patient and watchful, but unseen. It was not heroism that defined them, but persistence. Each soldier had endured harsh training, long marches, and endless repetition. Each had been tested physically and mentally. Yet the invisible tension they all felt suggested their most difficult test was not on the battlefield. It was something far stranger, far more unpredictable. At first, it was subtle. A radio call left unanswered, a sentry absent from his post, a patrol returned with reports that didn't make sense. Emil noted each anomaly in a small notebook, though he shared his observations with no one. Then came the strange silence, the kind of silence that presses in, heavier than night. Vehicles moved without sound. Footsteps echoed, then vanished. Orders given in the command tent were ignored. Something in the air told soldiers to expect the unexplainable. Food supplies occasionally disappeared overnight. Reports were erased from logs. Maps were shifted mysteriously. Lieutenant Becker grew anxious, yet refused to discuss it openly. Soldiers whispered theories, each more impossible than the last. Electrical equipment malfunctioned. Lights flickered without cause. Generators hummed but produced no output. Phones crackled with static, then went dead. Messages vanished. Yet no enemy attack occurred. The tension mounted, invisible but tangible. Emil walked the perimeter at night, noticing anomalies that grew more pronounced. Unnatural patterns in shadows, disturbances in the mud that could not be explained, noises that had no source. Other soldiers laughed nervously, trying to mask their unease. But Emil knew the warnings were real. Something was coming, something that would challenge every expectation of war. The morning began as usual, with mist clinging to the trees and frost crunching beneath boots. Soldiers checked rifles, inspected vehicles, and prepared for patrols. Yet, Emil sensed an unusual stillness in the air. The usual birdsong was absent. The wind whispered differently. Then came the first strange sound, a low hum, almost melodic, vibrating through the ground. Boots froze mid-step. The hum rose and fell, surrounding the camp. Radios flickered. Lights stuttered. Orders were shouted but went unanswered. Confusion rippled through the ranks. A distant engine roared, but no vehicle appeared. Soldiers turned toward the noise, hearts pounding. Shadows moved against the horizon, shapeless, shifting, impossible to track. Emil gripped his rifle, training kicking in, yet instinct screamed that this was not a normal threat. Men reported seeing figures in the woods. Not enemy troops, not animals, just shapes, shadows that didn't belong. A patrol that left the camp returned hours later, silent, eyes wide, speechless. Logs from the morning were missing entire entries. Supplies that were counted disappeared without trace. Footsteps echoed from the mess hall. Soldiers rushed to check. Doors were locked. No one was inside. Plates sat on tables, untouched, as if the occupants had vanished mid-meal. Emil stepped carefully, scanning every corner. The air felt thicker, charged, as though holding its breath. Then came the briefest crackle over the radio. A voice, familiar, commanding, shouted a warning, but the signal died before the message finished. Soldiers shouted in confusion. Lieutenant Becker's face drained of color. Reports from distant posts contradicted one another entirely. Everywhere anomalies compounded. Trucks started without drivers. Weapons rearranged themselves. Barracks that were counted twice now had missing beds. Panic threatened to spread, but the men hesitated, paralyzed by uncertainty. By midday, the hum had intensified. A rolling vibration shook the ground lightly but persistently. Shadows condensed near the perimeter, then vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. Soldiers looked at one another, seeking rationality, finding none. Emil realized they were witnessing something that defied all reason, and yet it unfolded without a single shot fired. As night fell, the incident escalated. Communication ceased entirely. Patrols returned blank. Logs and reports vanished or contradicted themselves. And then the silence. Total, oppressive, unbroken. Soldiers huddled, bewildered, while the hum faded into nothingness. Emil walked the perimeter, calling out, hearing only echoes of his own voice. When the sun rose the next day, the camp was empty. Not a single soldier remained. No footprints in the mud. Vehicles abandoned, intact. Orders, reports, and maps all gone. It was as if the army had evaporated overnight. Emil was nowhere to be found. The world had witnessed an army disappear, intact, without a single shot fired. And the question lingered, how had a war been won without a battle? Command reacted immediately. Search parties were dispatched, helicopters combed the perimeter, and local units scoured surrounding villages and forests. Every building was checked, every trail followed. Yet no trace of the missing soldiers remained. It was as though the army had vanished into thin air. Investigators examined logs, patrol reports, and radio transcripts. Contradictions abounded. Entries in the morning's logs disappeared entirely. Reports from the same patrol differed drastically depending on who filed them. Official records hinted at activity, but the evidence was always incomplete, conflicting, or erased. Interrogations of local civilians yielded nothing concrete. Some claimed to have seen strange lights or figures moving through the fog. Others insisted no one had passed through. Witnesses contradicted themselves, and several later recanted entirely. High-ranking officers were confounded. Communication lines were analyzed. Intelligence units ran every scenario, yet every effort ended in frustration. Notes mentioned anomalous behavior and unexplained absence, but no explanation was ever offered publicly. Even decades later, declassified files contain gaps. Pages are missing. Records are redacted. Some witnesses remained silent until their deaths, refusing to speak of what they saw. Researchers speculated. Was it secrecy, fear, or something else? Officially, the incident remains classified. The search continued for weeks, but no one found a single soldier, weapon, or supply. Units reported eerie similarities: shadows, sounds, and vanished communications. Every lead ended in contradiction. Even those who returned from patrols with minor sightings offered conflicting testimonies. It became clear. The Army's disappearance was unlike anything in history. The lack of violence, the absence of struggle, the total erasure of evidence suggested forces at work that defied conventional understanding. Some believed it had been orchestrated with precision, others whispered of impossibility. Ultimately, the world was left with fragments, anomalies, and silence. The Army had won its objective without firing a shot, and yet no one truly knew how. Intelligence manipulation. Some historians suggest that clever espionage and misinformation forced the opposing army to retreat without combat. Classified documents hint at elaborate deception plans. Yet contradictions remain. Why were entire units missing with no trace if it were mere trickery? Psychological operations. A few declassified reports imply that the enemy's morale collapsed suddenly, causing them to abandon positions without engagement. Witness accounts describe inexplicable fear in the opposing ranks, but skeptics note inconsistencies. How could fear alone cause a whole army to vanish while supply lines remained intact? A secret technology. Some researchers speculate that an unknown device or method rendered troops invisible or displaced them temporarily. References appear in erased military files and silenced testimonies. Yet no evidence survives, and nothing confirms the theory beyond speculation. Natural phenomena or anomalous events. Certain logs mention unexplained lights, vibrations, and sounds. Could the army have been caught in a rare, atmospheric, or dimensional anomaly? Theories conflict. Some dismissed it as folklore. Others insist eyewitnesses' testimonies were credible. Each theory leaves gaps. Every account has contradictions. Witnesses were silenced, files erased, and the truth carefully hidden. Even decades later, speculation dominates. Researchers argue endlessly, yet no conclusion satisfies the anomalies recorded. The more one studies, the more elusive the answer becomes. Every clue raises a dozen questions. Every report hints at something beyond ordinary understanding. Officially, nothing is confirmed. Unofficially, the mysteries persist, whispering that the truth may never be revealed. Decades have passed. The event remains buried in silence, obscured by redacted documents and erased testimony. Why? Some suggest national security, others whisper fear of revelation. Whatever the reason, the truth never reached the public eye. The army achieved its objective without combat. The world remembers the war, yet the mechanism of victory remains hidden. Orders were executed, missions completed, no shots fired, no blood spilled, yet the details are lost, intentionally or not. Historians debate, researchers theorize, but all that remains are fragments, glimpses of logs, faded photographs, and inconsistent accounts. Every answer generates new questions. And perhaps that is the point. The unknown persists, more compelling than certainty. Something extraordinary occurred, so extraordinary that no single explanation suffices. The final question hangs, unanswered. If a war can be won without a battle, what does that say about the nature of power itself? Share your thoughts, suggest your theories, decide for yourself, because the truth may never be fully known.